The building had a reputation for being haunted. Kids would dare each other to go inside, but unlike other places around town, they would actually see something, or at least claim that they did. Little Jamie Curry, 9 years old, went into the basement of the abandoned Leatherman's complex on a dare and saw a zombie. He said he knew it wasn't just some guy in an outfit, because the zombie had a grapefruit-sized hole in its chest, and he could actually see right through the middle of the thing. He had run right past his group of friends who were patiently waiting outside, screaming and wetting himself as he went. Another young kid from my town, Alicia de Silva, 11 years old, said it was all a bunch of garbage, that she wasn't afraid of a run-down factory building, except for maybe the asbestos which her uncle told her rots your lungs from the inside. She had said she would even go inside it at night. Why not? After all, there were no such things as ghosts or boogeymen. One of her friends told Alicia that if she went inside Leatherman's main building at night, grabbed something from the basement, and brought it back out for their mutual inspection, the friend would pay Alicia $5. Alicia had gasped. $5 was a good amount to someone like her. With $5, she could even get a kit so that she could finally fix her bike tire. They all met in front of the building, and Alicia disappeared into the dark fire doors on the side of the building, full of bravado and still laughing as she went inside. Except, unlike Jamie Curry, Alicia never came back out screaming and wetting herself, never had a chance to tell some unbelievable story about what she encountered in the fetid basement of that place. Her body was never found. The police were called after a few hours, and they searched the entire building from top to bottom. But they were able to follow some fresh footprints in the dust that might have been Alicia's, but when they got to the basement, the prints just disappeared, as if the person making them had simply gotten sucked up into the ceiling. And yet they did find one thing, the only real evidence left in the entire building that night. What they found still gives me nightmares sometimes. One of her eyeballs was inside a snow globe. The glass and foundation of the snow globe were all intact, and there were no signs of foul play anywhere on the decoration. It was as if it had been manufactured that way, with that blue, staring eye floating lazily next to plastic mountains and white glitter snowflakes. In my nightmares, I often see an old woman shaking that snow globe, an old hag who cackles and whose split lips form into a dreadful smile as she stares directly at me. The eye and the glitter all hang suspended in the water for a moment, then begin to fall slowly, the eye spinning rapidly as it drifts down the front of the globe. And when it stops, I see it is looking directly at me, and it still looks frightened. Okay, so that last paragraph was pretty dark, but what I'm trying to communicate is just how terrifying that place is. The kids in school know what's going on, though, at least in a general way. After all, Alicia and Jamie came from among them, and they're not the only ones. Others have gone into the building before, and Matt wants me to go with him tomorrow to look at it. Maybe that's why the dreams are getting worse. Maybe that's why I've woken up screaming twice in the last few hours. Because there was something else too. Something else I saw in my nightmares. In that building, around the back walls, there were dozens of kids. Their skin was chalk white, their hair and eyes all pure black. They were dead. And then thousands of missing posters started to fly down, all of them of smiling children. I looked between the ones surrounding me and the posters and noticed that some of them showed these same kids. I turned to run, but little rotted hands started pulling me down, and then I was sitting straight up in bed, yelling and pleading. I really don't want to go in that building tomorrow. Okay, so Matt and I went inside the doorway. No way was I going in the basement, but just the front doorway. Well, That wasn't too bad. I even stuck my head in and looked around inside. Matt didn't see it, but I did. There was something huge in the front hall. It wasn't much more than a silhouette. It looked like a very tall, very thin man in a suit whose neck was all twisted and strange. It came off his chest like a snake's, turning and curling back on itself, and at the end it had this reptilian face. Everything about the man was hairless and slimy. I could smell the strange stuff on his skin. But by the time I had gotten Matt's attention and pointed it out to him, the guy was gone. I don't know how he disappeared so fast. Matt was making fun of me as we walked home afterward, pointing at random alleyways and asking, "Do you see him there, too?" and then laughing. It wasn't that funny. I'll prove to him there was someone in there. I convinced Matt to come back with me. I need to see what's in there. He wasn't thrilled about it, but I told him an older kid offered to pay $10 for a souvenir from the place, and that I'd split it with him if he went with me. All of this was total crap, of course, but I want to see what was in there, and I definitely want these dreams to stop. "You know, you're lucky you have a friend as brave and manly as me," Matt said, puffing up his little bird chest. "After what happened to those other schmucks, everyone has been avoiding this place like the plague." "Yeah, but unlike all of them. You know it's just a building," I said. He gave me a funny look then. "It's just a building, but you know something actually happened," he said. "I was talking to my dad about it, and he said maybe a homeless guy was living there, totally deranged, and maybe he cut out Alicia's eye and kidnapped her. He stated this with the seriousness of a news anchor recounting bits of total nonsense for the audience. I smiled at his grave expression, repressing an urge to laugh. He looked over at me disapprovingly. "It could have happened, you know. Homeless people are homeless because they're crazy. My dad says so. Maybe one of them just went really crazy and started taking souvenirs off of people's bodies." "I guess," I said. We were most of the way through the old industrial part of town now. Shuttered factories and condemned buildings stretched out on both sides of the street. A fat, limping raccoon walked lazily out of a nearby alleyway. He gave us a sideways glance, stopping for a moment, then kept on maneuvering his round frame forward. Something that Matt had said had given me pause. "You know," I said, "it's kind of weird that we don't have homeless people out here. We have all these empty buildings, yet most of them camp out on the sidewalks on Main Street. I've never seen a single homeless person sleeping in one of these buildings, and I've never seen one even close to the Leatherman building. It's like they have some sort of sixth sense to avoid the place." "Clearly they're smarter than you and me," Matt muttered. We were walking past the rusty metal chain-link fence around the property. He looked pale, and his eyes were wide. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Right then, my instinct screamed at me to run. "Yes," I said simply, walking in first, taking the flashlight out of my pocket. "I need to know. For sure. Either way, I'd like evidence. Either it is my imagination or something supernatural actually exists within and around this building. An old musty smell permeated the huge hallway. I looked up and down it, wondering what was missing. Then I realized it had no graffiti. It had to be the only abandoned building I'd ever been in, without tons of graffiti scrawled on the inside. In some places, the walls had begun to buckle, and whole sections were crumbling and coming down. Farther ahead, the ceiling had collapsed inward, blocking half of the main hallway off. Downstairs, lights started turning on, and the entire building started to come to life. I looked at Matt, who was looking dazed. "Bro, what the hell is that?" he asked. I had no idea. "Someone's in here with us," I said. "Let's go check it out." He looked at me like I was insane. "Are you mad? What if it's cops? What if it's tweakers pulling out all the metal? We'll be quiet and just peek around the corner, I said. I think we're meant to see this. Don't you want to know what's going on here? He scowled. I'd much rather get home alive, he said, but he followed me reluctantly. There was a rhythmic hum coming from the floors now, as if machinery were coming to life. A sign, dirty and covered in spiderwebs, pointed to a staircase on the right. I looked down it, seeing bright light flood into the stairwell corridor, despite the fact that there was no electricity running to this building. We started down the staircase to the basement level. There was a smell of ozone in the air, a cyclical rhythmic humming that popped and buzzed. I took a deep breath, wondering what I would see down here. Then I poked my head around the corner. There were conveyor belts stretching against the basement, their legs embedded into the cracked concrete floors. Beams and pillars ran up from the floor to the ceiling every 10 feet or so. And it looked like there were countless workers just sitting on each side of the conveyor belts, sitting in crooked wooden chairs with splintering legs and backs. But it was the workers who caught my attention most of all. They looked strange. Does something look off to you? I whispered to Matt, who had been standing behind me only a moment earlier, but I got no reply. I figured he was too engrossed in the bizarre nature of what we were seeing to respond. The workers, if that's what they were, looked blurred, as if in an overexposed picture with a long shutter speed. Their skin appeared to writhe and crackle, some of their heads constantly turned from side to side, and their limbs, all of them appeared to be missing limbs. I saw pale white bodies without arms, without legs, even without heads. But they all still continued working in unison, moving in that jerky, blurred way. Jesus, Matt, do you see? I asked suddenly, my eyes widening. Do you see what they're doing? I looked forward in horror as I saw human bodies rolled down the conveyor belts. The people were still alive. They were naked, many of them crying and covered in blood. As they passed by the workers, the blurred hands quickly took pieces of their skin off. Glistening sheets of it were raised by other workers, walking along between the lines, and they would give an admiring look at the large pieces of skin, smiling eerily as their heads writhed from side to side and blurred in my vision. And I saw the kids from my dream, the kids from the missing persons posters, all in the corner. They were huddled, emaciated with wide, staring eyes. They trembled and cowered as some of the workers came over to grab them and throw them on the belts. I turned to get the hell out of there. And that was when I realized Matt was no longer behind me. I caught a glimpse of something dark and massive moving at the top of the stairs, disappearing around the corner. I was alone. I know I should have stayed and looked for Matt, but instead, I ran. I got out of that place and went home and hid under my blankets. I thought 13 was old enough to deal with this, but it has gone way beyond what I thought. Matt's parents are calling. My parents stand at the bottom of the stairs, my mother holding the landline in her thin hand, my father looking disturbed. They tell me that Matt is missing, that he never came home last night. What should I tell them? Certainly not the truth. If I started talking about the things in that building, I would be forced into a psychiatric ward before the week was up. The police stopped by and asked me a few questions. I told them all straight-up lies. No, sir, I haven't seen him, and I have no idea what happened to him. But what else could I say? That he was taken by something from a nightmare. I have to go back. I have to try to rescue Matt. I shouldn't have run like I did. But seeing those things cutting up people like that, it scared the shit out of me. Tonight, once my parents go to sleep, I'm going to sneak out, and everyone will think I'm a hero if I bring him back. If I don't, I'll probably end up as just another stupid missing kid who ended up way over his head. I went back. I made it out. But I think they're coming for me. There was something in the basement. All of the conveyor belts were gone. The lights were off. The rhythmic hum had disappeared. It was as if the other night was all a hallucination, except for, of course, Matt is still missing. His parents are freaking out, and I can't even tell them I know what happened to him. Going into the building alone was terrifying. My legs felt like wood, and I kept glancing behind me every second as if I were hearing imaginary pursuers. But I walked through to the staircase, and I saw nothing. I went down to the basement, peeking my head around the corner. It was just a mostly empty basement, some broken furniture and old boxes stacked in one corner. I shone my light all over and saw no one. But there was a light coming from the far corner, a faint, glowing orange light. A feeling of dread came over me. I crept slowly forward, trying to find the source of that light. A faint smell of smoke and roasting meat seemed to creep through the air. Off past the last line of boxes, I saw what looked like a small crater on the floor. There was a hole there with glowing fire underneath. Cracked spider webbed out from it in all directions for a few feet. More curious than afraid now, I peered forward and looked down. Beneath the abandoned building, there was another world. It had fire licking the walls and ground, and in the middle of this inferno I saw Matt. His face was a map of blackish-purple bruises, his head was cocked at an unnatural angle, and I saw blood pouring out of his ears and nose. He looked up at me, and the bones in his neck grated together. I saw his spine was broken, and his entire throat was crushed inward. "Help me," he croaked. "You brought me here. Now, help me. You can't leave me. They'll come for you next." All around him, I saw hands reaching up, the pale, jerky hands of those strange workers. They grabbed Matt and dragged him back down to the fire. I saw other horrid creatures in the flames, some laughing and insane, others shrieking in agony. Large, black, insectile silhouettes moved through the smoke and flames, and then, like one, they started coming up towards the hole, coming up to the building where they would be free. I ran then, and I never went back. I know now that Matt is dead. I can't sleep. Every time I look out the window, I see shapes in the front yard, blurred humanoids with missing limbs, hiding in the bushes and trees, and constantly inching closer.